we go. All right, so this is Dr. Gould. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, I will
do what you want
gonna
to do.
share my screen. I have a very brief PowerPoint just to help structure things. Let me see if I can even make it work with my anxiety. Just simple things become so hard.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll take everybody's attention away, and if everybody who wants CEs can put their first and last name in the chat box just for like attendance that you're here, that would be great.
Okay, let me see. Wow, all these boxes are popping up. My computer is listening to me or something. Hang on, I'm having some issues with this.
Okay.
How do I turn that off? Trying to work out how to make it not be full screen because I can't actually see anything right now. Not even the share. Hold on. There we go.
Are you on a Mac?
I'm on a Mac that's attached to a monitor. Let me just do this. I'm going to just share. Okay. So you should be able to see the PowerPoint. I just don't know how to do it so that I don't have it on the whole screen, but I think it's fine. I can see you, Aaron, so that's I can at least talk to you.
Cool.
All right. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for asking me to come. I'm going to be talking today about an article. I'm going to try and not get distracted by the chat, so you can monitor that, Aaron, if there's any questions. I'm going to talk a bit about the article that we recently was recently accepted to BAP on psychological flexibility and self-compassion for parents during COVID and beyond. I would love this to be not so formal, and you don't need me to read the article for you. You can read it. You can definitely read it yourselves. And I'm very happy that the preprint is also available for free online, so we can provide the link to that for anybody who wants to access that paper. It should be published in BAP as well at any moment. I think the last production phase is over. But you can still get the preprint, I believe. If you can't, then you can email me and I can send it to, I can share it with you, I believe. So I want to talk through the paper a little bit, but I also want to answer questions that people might have about the paper, about working with parents, about things that are showing up for them that are hard, about how your own questions about how do you support parents when they're distressed, how do you manage that whilst also navigating your own challenges during this time, because of course it's not just those that we're working with that are struggling, it's also we're all in this crazy roller coaster of a time together. So I want to make sure it's as interactive as possible. And Aaron, you're going to prompt me to say, I have to say some words during this so you can get your CEs. So Aaron will prompt me.
I'm going to set my timer right now so I don't forget.
Because I will not remember. So I've sort of touched on this a wee bit, but just some disclaimer-y type things. Obviously, I'm a co-author. I wrote this paper with my colleagues and I'm fully invested in the article we're talking about today and its contents. And the manuscript was accepted for publication in BAP on an expedited basis as part of their emergency series that they wonderfully have offered to us in this crisis kind of time. I've been so delighted by the things that have been coming out of this initiative, such wonderful practical tools for practitioners. But it is important to say that we didn't obviously go through the normal, very lengthy process. It was an expedited review process and is part of this series. And it doesn't represent the positions of ABA or Springer Nature who published the journal, just to put that out there. I fully stand by everything in this article though. It's my baby. And Lisa Coyne. So, and a little bit about us. Oh wait, that's just about the article. Never mind, I'm gonna skip over that. This is the article right here. So it's actually called First Things First, Parent Psychological Flexibility and Self-Compassion During COVID-19. And really brief, just a little bit about us. So myself and Lisa Coyne, actually all of the people that are here, other than Anthony, I guess Kelly also is not practicing right now. He's still teaching, I think finishing up and retired now, and Anthony Bigland also retired, but still, I mean, these two men are very prolific in the activities they're involved in, a lot of like committees and do-gooding kind of stuff in the world, and also writing articles and helping us. Whereas myself and Lisa and Michaela are clinicians. Michaela, I worked with in the hospital at McLean Hospital. Actually, she was one of our CRCs, kind of like an RBT level person. She's studying her master's right now, and she's our research assistant as well. And she works with us at the clinic doing clinical work with families. And of course, me and Lisa are also clinicians. And that's kind of why I wanted to say who we are, because this article was born out of a desire to really produce something practical. The clinical work matters to us so much. We are academics and we do research too, but day to day we're working with families. And so it's kind of like our baby, our clinical baby. And we're really coming at this work from that perspective. And it's come out of the experience, our collective experience of working with families in lots of different adverse kind of contexts, not just COVID-19. I don't really need to spend too much time, I think, at this point, talking about what context we're in, the context of COVID. But one thing I would say about this paper is Kelly and Lisa and I got together and we had a conversation about some of the resources that were coming out for parents and for families. And our feeling was that they felt a little bit too much like to-do lists, like more things that parents should be doing or should not be doing, and all the things they should be doing in order to homeschool their kids the correct way and not mess them up, and all the things they should do in order to have an orderly home life, and all the activities they should be doing with their kids in order to make it meaningful. And even the self-care, some of the self-care stuff we were seeing coming out also felt like an added to-do, like another thing that you should be doing and that you're not doing a good enough job. So we kind of talked about that and thought, is there some way that we can try to write something that is not another to-do, or is a way that we could come at taking care of yourself that isn't like adding to that list, and also something that's sensitive to just everything that everyone's juggling. Of course, it's not perfect. The article's definitely not perfect. And one of the things that I struggled with was thinking, all of this psychological flexibility stuff and self-compassion stuff, yes, we need that before parents are going to be able to access our evidence-based behavior management strategies and so on. But also, what about the families where there's stuff that's needed even before that? Like some families right now are struggling with how do they find shelter? How do they get food on the table? Like basic needs. And so this is a great article. I stand by it. And, it's important to be mindful of those kinds of, that you may, as a behavior analyst, may need to be helping your families meet their basic needs or connect with services and other people that can help them meet their basic needs before you even do any of this stuff. And I just want to kind of state that first. So the idea is, we use this metaphor in this article of the oxygen mask, and how when you're on an airplane, parents are told to put their oxygen masks on first before helping their child put theirs on. And I would kind of step back from that even more and say that for practitioners, we also need to be putting our oxygen masks on first before we can start helping other parents. But part of that oxygen mask we felt was increasing psychological flexibility and self-care with this idea of building resilience within adversity and finding meaning within adversity, and also prevention of burnout. So buffering against the effects of stress and burnout. And psychological flexibility, I'm going to give you the wordy definition that we have in our paper, and then I'll just sum up what I think it means basically. But in the paper, we used this Kashdan and Hayes definition. So psychological flexibility refers to the ability to recognize and adapt to situational demands and to remain aware and open to the present moment, such that one can recognize and shift behavior strategies as required by situational demands, and to engage in actions that are congruent with one's deeply held values. So if you didn't fall asleep after the first 5 words, then good job. But I feel like by the end of reading that sentence, I've forgotten where I started. So really what we're talking about in psychological flexibility, it's just like what we would talk about in terms of behavioral flexibility. But instead of overt behavioral flexibility, we're talking about, can you respond to your thoughts, your emotions, your private events, private stimuli in a flexible or flexibly in a flexible ways, in many different ways, as opposed to just one rigid way. And really what we're talking about here is when you're experiencing distress, psychological distress, so basically just aversive private stimuli, so feelings you don't like, thoughts that are hard, can you do something else other than just avoid? Because obviously anytime you're presented with an aversive stimulus, you're going to want to avoid. You're either going to want to terminate that stimulus or contact with that stimulus, or you're going to want to escape from it. So behavioral flexibility, that's the same thing as psychological flexibility. The psychological part just means thoughts and feelings, like can you respond to your thoughts and feelings flexibly? And then in order to do what's going to be most adaptive in the long run, as opposed to just avoiding in the short term. And then self-care, we have a self-care definition from the World Health Organization in our paper. And we talk about it as referring to the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, especially during periods of stress, or the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without support from a healthcare provider. That's pretty straightforward. I think we all generally know what we're pointing to when we talk self-care, we talk about self-care. And really in this paper, we're just arguing that we think that supporting the development of psychological flexibility and self-care are fundamental to promoting well-being within families. And also, I would say just for providers, promoting resistance to burnout, resiliency, and the ability for you to also stay present with the distress that the people you're working with might be feeling and not get buried under it. Like, I think that's really important to point out, because generally as behavior analysts, I think we're not trained, at least I don't think I received training until I started working with Lisa Coyne and doing a lot of work myself. I did not get training in how to buffer myself, like how to carry the distress of the families that I was working with in a way that didn't burn me out or kind of cripple me or get kind of buried under it. And it's really something that's missing from our clinical training as behavior analysts. I think most other healthcare providers, including doctors, nurses, others who are not mental health care or behavioral health practitioners, get this training in how to prevent compassion fatigue would be another descriptor that people use, or burnout from carrying the weight of other people's distress. So put your own oxygen mask on first. That's my take home. Do this stuff with yourself first before you start trying to do it with families, or simultaneously, concurrently would be fine too. Does anyone have questions about that so far before I just get into kind of the tools and the practices side of things? I also have no concept of time, Aaron, so give me some markers.
I've got my timer set, so.
Great. Since COVID started, I stopped wearing a watch, which is kind of funny. I usually wear a watch every single day, and I just never wear a watch anymore. I don't know what time it is or what day it is or anything.
If you want to go ahead and give the first password, we can go ahead and do that, since it's a good stopping point.
Okay, the first password is going to be self-compassion. I'm going to write that down.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to write it down too, because I'll put it in the Google form for everybody too. But yeah, I don't see any questions here yet.
All right, so we didn't talk about this in the article, but I'm going to talk about it in this talk since I'm talking to behavior analysts, I think, mostly. But I've been thinking about for a while about compassionate care and compassion in ABA, and it's important for me to express that I personally feel like ABA is inherently compassionate as a science. When you think about the fact that our science, we believe as part of our science, right, behavior is a product of context, interacting with your context, right? That to me means that everyone's behavior makes sense given their context. And their context, of course, is not just the immediate context, it's also the historical context, cultural context, their private world, as well as their public world. All of that is a complicated layers of context. But everyone's behavior makes sense when you understand their context. And that's very compassionate view. That means that everybody's doing the best they can, given their circumstances and their history. And I don't know if we can get more compassionate than that. It means that having a science of behavior means that I'm no different from my clients. I'm no different, not special. There's no sick person, well person. There's no, we're all human in the soup together. We're all subject to the same behavior principles as every other person in the world. And that to me is also very compassionate stance to take with our clients. That we are no better than they are. We're all be able to be really successful. We're all able to adapt in very positive ways where we can be heroes, we can do really amazing work, and we can also make mistakes. We all have failures that we can think of. We all struggle, we all suffer. We're not always the best versions of ourselves. But also that there's hope for everybody, right? Everybody has the potential to change. We can change behavior. As behavior scientists, we can change behavior. Everyone can be the best version of themselves. So that to me is very compassionate as well. And the last thing that's coming to mind is just this idea that to me, ABA is relational. So by that, I just mean you cannot practice ABA or be an ABA practitioner or be involved in behavioral intervention without relating to others, right? That is the whole, we're not operating in a vacuum by ourselves. We're interacting with humans that need our help. That's why we're there. So everything we do as behavioral analytic practitioners is relational. Sometimes that's directly interacting with another human, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a child. Sometimes it's indirect, like writing emails, writing behavior plans, talking on the phone, whatever, text messages, things like that. But it's essentially we cannot do our jobs. Our jobs are relational. And so that is very important, I think, for us to think about in terms of how we are part of the context of the parents we work with. And that means our own stress, our own things that we're struggling with are part of that context too. And we've got to think about that. What are we bringing to this interaction? And how are we managing? What are we modeling for our clients and the parents we work with? And it's not a unidirectional interaction either. It's a bidirectional thing. So our parents affect us as well as us affecting them. So this is a little piece of the paper that Kelly Wilson actually put in, which it's very Kelly Wilson-ish if you know him and his writing. Especially the hashtags are totally Kelly, and we went back and forth a lot, me, Lisa, and Kelly, more me and Kelly actually, about the hashtags. He really wanted to hashtag the heck out of the entire paper, and I, being me and being a little more formal and was just cringing and being like, no, we can't, Kelly, please, I'm sorry, but we have to take out some of the hashtagging. I can't. So we came to a compromise and we kept these ones in as the principles of these practices. And I think it works really nicely. I actually really like it now. Now I got over my weirdness about it. So the general principles are more like, they're not the actual tools that we were suggesting that you use with the parents, but it's more like the guide or the way of being, the way of doing these things, rather than the actual tools that we're going to use. And the first one is this idea that small things matter, that even the tiniest little shift in someone's behavior matters. And we should know that as behavioral analysts. We talk about shaping a lot, right? Small approximations. We work with kids on the spectrum who are really struggling, and we have to start really small and shape, right? A kid who can't talk, we're not gonna jump straight to trying to teach them to speak words. We start with signs, we start with imitation, we start with getting them babbling and reinforcing utterances and things like that. And it's the same with self-care. So just thinking about that, even the smallest thing, even the smallest approximation towards self-care really matters and can lead to making a huge difference. And in the article, I think Kelly kind of uses another example. Let me see, what does he do? I think he uses sleep, even like the tiniest bit of sleep. He talks about some research showing that even the smallest amount more sleep can make a massive difference to your physiology and their well-being. Yes, he also uses the example of small reductions in sugar intake too, and things like that as making a massive difference. And then the second one is about everything, is thinking about everything interacting. And if you're an interbehaviorist like me, then you're already thinking about the behavioral field and how everything is interacting with everything else, and everything is being stimulated and responding is happening all at the same time. But really, Kelly's just kind of noting that you just thinking about, again, small things mattering. So helping parents understand that even the tiniest little shift somewhere will have an impact on something else. And like within the system of the family, if one person just starts to step a little bit differently, that's going to shift everyone else in that system. And so parents, his take home is parents don't have to do it all at once. They don't have to lift everything all at once, and not everybody has to change everything all at once. And a good reminder for us as behavior analysts too. Let's see what else. So then patterns matter. So we know this as behavior analysts too, right? So it's not normally a behavior in isolation that matters. It's the patterns that we look for. Patterns are what cause problems. So here he uses the idea of donuts, just like one donut is just one donut, but eating donuts every single day may become a problem. So helping parents look for patterns, and often they're going to be insensitive to patterns because they're so stuck in the distress of right now. And it can make them insensitive to the long-term effects of some of the things that they're doing with their children. And we'll get into kind of talking a bit more about mindfulness and teaching parents how to slow down and really be present and start to notice patterns and how what they're doing impacts them and their families in the long run, as well as just short term. And meaning matters. Again, he's just kind of talking about the fact that small things can have great meaning, right? So he says, like, part of the reason small things matter lies not in the thing itself, but rather the meaning of the thing, right? So taking a moment, like when you just pause and spend a moment with your child, kiss them on the head, and then send them to bed, that small moment means a lot. It means you're worth pausing over, you're interesting, time with you is valuable, you really matter, and you're really loved. So even when parents are really, really busy and they're running around trying to keep everything in order and do the millions of things, just pausing for those small moments can send a huge message to that child that lingers on. And I think for us as practitioners, thinking about that too, right? So when you have your agenda and you go into a family meeting or you go into a parent training session or a session with a kid, and there's a million things going on and you're trying to get everything done that you need to do and run all the programs and do all of that. Just taking that like one pause moment just to slow down and be present with that parent and just asking them, like, how are you doing? That can have a massive impact and is very, very meaningful. It might seem like nothing or a small thing, but it really might mean a lot. And it really communicates to families too that I'm here and I see you and I care. I really actually genuinely care. Stronger together speaks for itself, but basically the idea that we're all stronger together and we model for each other and we need to build community. And Kelly is very passionate about this, and that he talks about how we're all social animals. Humans are social animals, but along the lines of evolution and the way our society is structured, particularly in the last couple of hundred years, we've moved towards this idea of individualism and living alone, and families being, small family units instead of like bigger community units. And that's causing us problems, I think. So we may think we want to live alone, but actually we're not built to live alone. We're actually built to live in broader communities. And so what he's suggesting here is this idea that building community in times of stress matters. And there's many different ways to do that, whether it's like just starting your own group with parents that doing something with a friend. I'm doing this with one of my good friends, Louisa Canham. We basically get together every day and do an exercise class or a yoga class or something together. And it seems so not that important when I first started doing it with her. But 2 months in, I'm like noticing that we talk every day and it matters to me. It's like my one contact every day, guaranteed, where I hang out with another human and we actually do something together. And I didn't expect that when I first started it with her. So I encourage you all to find ways to connect with each other and do something other than just talking about COVID. That's the other piece of this. I have not found it very enriching in my life to meet with friends on Zoom just to talk about the COVID situation. The novelty of that wore off real fast after the first week or two. I was like, this is just depressing. But when I meet with a friend to do something else together, which obviously we can't go hang out in a bar together or go to a restaurant, but meeting with them, playing a game, stupid games. I hate games so much. I'm not a board game person at all. I really hate it, but I'm willing to do it to interact with my friends, or an exercise class. Or the other thing I love is Netflix with friends. I don't know if any of you have done that, but the app where you can actually watch something with your friend and type comments, that is much more meaningful to me than to just talk about everything that's really difficult over and over and over again. And the last one is just self-care is love. So I had mentioned that we wanted really to promote this idea that self-care doesn't have to be a to-do, that self-care can be an act of love towards yourself and not something, it shouldn't be something that's a have to and a must and an effortful thing. It's a quality of action or a way of being in the world. I think that's the best way to say it. An act of love and kindness towards oneself. Any questions so far? I think we're good. I feel like I'm waffling.
No, you're doing great. Now, one thing I wanted to say was like the self-love thing and self-compassion. I've had to learn that it's not what the world tells me what self-care is. It's what is that to me specifically? Mm-hmm. You know, it's not a bubble bath and a glass of wine, because I'm not a big fan of wine, you know, but it's, maybe it's taking a shower. Maybe it's making sure I drink enough water, maybe, you know, and like you're saying, I hear all these things coming through as far as like, you know, we have to put on our own oxygen mask before we can care for others. And it's like, to me, that self-love part there, as clinicians, if we're then to engage in these meaningful moments with parents and to listen to them and ask them how they are, it's like, we have to make sure that we're doing those things first in order to for that to be genuine when we're having those moments. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does make sense. And I think one of the biggest acts of self-care might just be to actually just pause in your day and just check in with yourself and say, like, am I okay? Like, how am I doing? What do I need? And asking ourselves what we need. And it is a skill, Erin. I think self-compassion can be really hard. I had to work really hard to learn how to do self-compassion work for myself. It feels weird if you're not used to it. If you're used to getting yourself to do things by beating yourself with a stick, which I think a lot of us are, and behavior analysts are very hard on themselves in general. We're really perfectionists a lot of the time. So if you're used to talking to yourself in an unkind way and like using a stick to kind of get yourself moving forward and beating yourself up, it feels really hard to practice self-compassion. It's going to feel weird. Your mind's going to tell you it's not right. It's going to feel awkward. But I would invite people to try it anyway and be curious about that, because often that's, you know, we ask parents to do really hard stuff all the time that's going against their instincts as parents, right? So when we ask a parent to ignore their child when they're crying and screaming, that parent is going to feel extremely uncomfortable, but we ask them to do it and keep going because we know in the long run they're going to learn a new skill and it's going to be better for them and their child, and things are going to feel good later. So I would just have you notice when you practice self-compassion or some skill that's new to you and you notice the discomfort, that doesn't mean it's a sign that you should stop. It might be information telling you that something change is about to happen, or a new skill is about to be acquired, or that you're sitting, putting your own punishing behavior on extinction, so to speak. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. It just is. And it's going to feel mechanical and weird. Like when you first start practicing self-compassion, for me, it was like me saying to myself, you're okay. And it felt really uncomfortable and weird and rigid and just like, you know, it was fully prompted. Basically, I was fully prompting myself through this act of self-compassion. But over time, it becomes less awkward and less, it becomes more fluent and natural, and some of the other properties will come with that. And but you have to be willing to be uncomfortable first. Anytime you do anything new, you have to be curious and willing and open and see what happens.
I love that. That it's that, you know, I think we're the parallel you drew between, you know, we're asking parents to do really hard things, but sometimes we're not willing to do really hard things, you know, I think is really important. And the other thing too is, you know, you were saying like building a community, and the support and everything like that. I think it was like all of a sudden, I'm shocked Zoom didn't crash within the
Mhm.
first couple weeks of this, and it was just like invites to this and this and this, and I read something online, and it was somebody's story about just being invited to like multiple things all day long, and it was just like I can't, like, and saying no is part of that,
Mhm.
and being okay with saying no is part of that too, I think, and figuring
Yeah.
out that the way that you get support and community, like you're saying, a one-on-one workout with somebody else, like that might be okay. If all of your friends are good with Zoom and the background noise that comes with Zoom and all of that, like, then that is by all means, like, that is yours. That doesn't work for everybody. So it's figuring out, you know, like you're saying, what works for you, and what are you willing to do. Like you're saying, you're willing to do board games for that connection. Like, is that okay? Is it like, yes, that connection is more important, or is it like you're forcing yourself into this environment that is so uncomfortable and so aversive just to get, and the benefit isn't there, you know?
Well, I think, Aaron, you said something important there, like when you said forcing yourself, because I think it's about noticing when you're choosing to do something that's uncomfortable and when you're forcing yourself to do it because rule, right? Because I have to, or I should, or, you know, this, you know, I'm going to force myself through it because that's what good people do or good behavioralists do, as opposed to choosing to do something uncomfortable. That is going to feel very, very different. When you say to yourself, okay, like for this webinar, let's just say this webinar, because I get very nervous about presenting, which everybody knows already. But if I say, oh, I have to do this webinar, oh, why did I say yes to this? I have to do it. Okay, well, I just can't. I mean, I can't not do it because I said I'll do it, so I have to do it. I'm going to force myself to do it. My experience is going to be way more difficult than if I can pause and notice, okay, I notice that I'm, you know, really anxious about doing this thing, and that tells me it's because it really matters to me and it's on a topic that really matters to me, and I've agreed to do it, so that's off the table. The choice has been made. I agreed to do it, so I'm going to choose to do it willingly. I'm going to choose to do it. It's really hard, I'm anxious, and I choose to do this because I really care about this topic and I want to offer this to for free to people so who can't afford the, you know, the cost of it and all of these other values-based reasons to do this. That feels very different than when I'm beating myself up with a stick and telling myself I have to do it, and why do I always say do this to myself, and why do I always get anxious, you know. It's noticing that. So I think when you go to practice some self-care things, one, notice, are you telling yourself you have to do it, or are you choosing to do it? And can you notice, yes, new things are always going to feel uncomfortable. So, but there's a difference between forcing yourself to do something that isn't really for you and doing something new and it feeling uncomfortable because you're not used to it. So getting really curious about that journey and what you're choosing and what you're not, and why you're doing things. Like, am I doing this because I think I should, and it's a rule, or am I doing this because it's in the service of something that I value? I think that's the mindfulness piece too, right? When we talk about mindfulness and acceptance there, we're talking about noticing what you're attending to, noticing the function of your behavior, noticing what you're choosing, noticing what you're feeling and thinking in all aspects of your direct experience or the direct contingencies. And the acceptance piece being, am I willing to put myself in this situation where I'm experiencing these uncomfortable things? And, you know, honestly, a lot of the stuff in the COVID thing is not in our control, right? It just is. There is so much uncertainty and there's so much hardship, suffering. There's just a lot of stuff we don't have control over. And I'm not suggesting that we just be okay with that, because you don't have to be okay with it. I'm just suggesting that we notice that there's a lot of things we don't have control of. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we can either choose to make that uncertainty or this adversity about struggling, fighting, trying to figure it out, trying to problem solve, and a lot of things you can't problem solve, suffering and kind of trying to get away from or feel better. Or we can make it be about, okay, I'm in this adverse situation. Do I want to make this be about struggle, or do I want to make this be about something more meaningful to me? And for parents, it might be, I want to be able to look back on this and feel like I modeled something important for my kids, or feel like I learned something important from this situation, or it was about resilience and being with my kids, and showing them how to be vulnerable and it be okay. Like whatever matters to you as a person, as a behavioral analyst, practitioner, parent or not parent. So we have that choice, and the acceptance piece is I am willing to make room for all of this shitty stuff in the service of whatever fill in the blank value that you have, right? That was a very long-winded rant there, but
no, that was perfect. And this is a good prompt in time to give that second password. But one thing that I mean, you were drawing parallels between like, okay, the things that we're forcing ourselves to do versus the things we're choosing to do. And I wonder how much that kind of shows up for parents and what we're asking them to do, you know, in terms of treatment and intervention, is what they feel forced to do versus what they're choosing to do. You know, but give the password. And I don't know if you want to move, because I'm sure all that will be addressed, but
I'm going to say that the next password is going to be purpose. Yeah, what shall we do? How much time do we have left? Because I want to make sure.
We got like 20 minutes left.
Okay. So I guess I'll just briefly touch on these other two pieces. But I guess, Aaron, I'm thinking like, you know, we have these great tools, and we are asking parents, you know, we're thinking, we're going into our jobs with them and thinking it's our jobs as behavioral analysts. We've been brought in to help them with this kid on the spectrum and teach skills and do all of these things. And so sometimes I think you know, it's easy for us to go into this or come into this crisis thinking I have to figure out how to continue doing what I was doing before, but in this brand new context is totally different. And without thinking like actually our job is to try and flex with the change in context and figure out how do I be a behavior analyst in this context, because it's not the same. Everything is different. We're all doing telehealth, or some of us are still going to homes under these kind of really adverse conditions. And I just tell people, advise people to take a step back and really take a breath and think, how do I be the best behavior analyst in this context? And sometimes that means it's okay to not go in with a huge agenda and try to do a million different things and try to do all of the things and keep working on all of the same goals that you were before. That's actually not helpful. That's essentially being like the rat that continues to press the lever even though the contingency has changed and there's no food coming, right? You're essentially just doing the same behavior and it's not working. It's not going to work. So really, like, it might be you know, it might be that just showing up on the call and asking a parent how they're doing and just being present with them is actually very meaningful. And it's okay to take time as well to figure out how to do your job. Like, it's like learning a whole new skill. Like learning how to be a behavior analyst in this context is like starting from scratch again. I can tell you that I felt lucky because I have some experience of doing telehealth, because I've had to work with families over telehealth for the past couple of years, because some of the family kids that I worked with in the hospital are out of state. But the first year that I was using telehealth was really uncomfortable for me. I did not like it. I find it really hard. I had complained about it pretty much every week in my supervision with Lisa. And then I started to figure out how to do my work with families over telehealth. So I had like a head start, but I had kind of stepped back and thought about everybody else who hasn't had the experience of learning how to use telehealth and suddenly being thrown into a situation where all of your hours are on telehealth. It is a completely different thing. Give yourself permission to slow down and learn a whole new way of responding. Like, that's okay. That, I feel like that's like a little side rant of mine, but just behavior analysts too, not just for parents. Give parents time. Parents cannot do everything. It's absolutely total bullshit that expecting parents to run programs, do this, do their treatment plan, work with their kids, homeschool their kids, cook dinner, do their jobs, do everything else, leave their home, care for elders, do all of the things. Like, it's just impossible. Nobody can do all of the things. It's absolutely impossible. So us coming in and being like, oh, and also you need to now run your child's programs, is just not workable. I don't even know where I was going with that.
No, I think, but I think that that's why this specifically is so valuable, is because if you sit in other webinars about telehealth or something like that, and depending on if somebody has a background in this or understanding in this, or even has experience being in that situation themselves, a lot of what behavior analysts, I think, from what I've observed or being told, is how to manipulate and take what you were doing and put that into this context over here. And for me, I'm like, please, like, to some degree, maybe that is good, but it's like, go in and say, what are you struggling with right now, and how can I help you with that?
Yeah.
It's like, what, because like you just said, like homeschooling, I've watched Kristen just try to teach homeschool, and it's even just 2 half-hour classes a day, and that's it, plus another kid going to and from work, plus trying to have to work with dogs and noise and all this stuff. And it's not even just having access to a coffee shop to escape to go to. And it's like, that little bit is so disruptive to the skills that you already have. Like, you have to, like you're saying, learn all of these new skills. And if we're not being flexible in what we need to do, I don't know how we would expect them to meet that.
Yes. And so I'm also then saying, shining a mirror on us as behavior analysts, to give ourselves permission for not being able to do all of the things in the same way that we were doing. It's okay. You can't. The contingencies have changed. Everything is different. We can't, it's okay not to try and force a square peg into a round hole. Don't waste your energy there. Take a minute and allow yourself to figure this out. It's going to be a lot more useful in the long run, and the parents will appreciate you modeling that too, and that modeling that flexibility. So in the article, we talked about also modeling vulnerability and saying to parents, it's okay to not be okay. Sometimes I'm not okay. This is really hard. It's going to be hard, but I'm here, and I'm here to support you, and we're going to do this together. We're going to figure out something we can work on together. I think that's really, really, really important. Did I see a question?
No, Kelly just put in the chat box. It was a good comment. Like, the skills that we're learning, because it goes back to that being forced to versus choosing to. It's like the skills that we're learning are out of necessity right now. Whether it's as like parents and clinicians, it's not necessarily a choice, but it's a survival to some degree, just to make it through every day. And there's compassion in order to get through that. I just love the focus on compassion here. It's just so important.
Yeah, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I do encourage everybody just to read the article if you have the chance, because there are really concrete examples of the types of things you can have parents do and that you can do to try and bring some compassion and some ease, I guess, just easing the distress, like resilience building throughout your entire day, like little things. So in the mindfulness, we just are emphasizing taking these moments through your day just to pause and notice what you're attending to. Try to find a sweet spot. Maybe it's the coffee you're drinking and the smell of the coffee. For me, just taking a second to notice the birds outside my window. They're so loud. Since this whole pandemic thing, the birds are really happy. But just listening to the birds, or stroking my cat's fur, or just in the morning when I wake up, that's prime time for my mind to kick into like everything I need to be worried about today. Taking a moment just to notice how comfortable the bed is. I know that also may lead to some thoughts about not wanting to get out of bed, but appreciating how comfortable the bed is and how lucky I am to have a really comfortable bed to sleep in. And these sweet moments can really add sources of reinforcement throughout your day in a very impoverished environment. And also, even boredom can be alleviated that way. So just taking a moment to really start to be curious and notice something different about your environment that you didn't notice before. So helping parents again, it doesn't have to be a to-do. It's like, what are you doing already, and can you build some of these skills into it? So are you washing the dishes? You can practice mindfulness. When you're doing the laundry, when you're reading a story to your child, like these things that you're doing already, you can use these skills, and it doesn't have to be a to-do. I mean, values and committed action, we're really just talking about, and we said it in the paper this way, but like making a promise to yourself and then going after that promise no matter what. Like, what kind of parent do you want to be in this pandemic? Like, what do you want this to be about when you're 80 and you're talking to your grandkids about this situation? What do you want to remember about it? Who you were, what your family did, how you approached this adversity, what kind of behavioral analyst were you? For me, I want to look back on this and see a person that was doing the best they could and was compassionate and kind. And I can't, you know, when I meet with my clients, I know I can't make it all better. I can't fix everything for them. I can't problem solve everything. I have some skills I can offer, but I can be there and show up and make space for everything that they're experiencing, and think about, like, what would I want them to say about me as a behavior analyst at the end of this or in the future. And I think that's really helpful. And the other piece is to notice that you're going to get off track. So again, self-compassion for the fact that we're all going to get off track. We're all going to get caught up in our worries and our thoughts. We're all going to start behaving in ways that we don't like. We're all going to snap at our kids. We're all going to be irritable. We're going to be stressed. We're going to do and say things we aren't proud of. But in any moment, you have that choice. As soon as you notice, you can turn back. Right? That gives me so much hope. It's just as a human, just this idea that moment to moment, every moment has a choice. I can choose to go this direction or this direction. I can keep going this way, or I can turn back towards like what I care about. How in this next moment, because all you have is the current moment. You can't behave with respect to the future or the past, right? You can only behave in the moment. Who do I want to be right now? So in the article, we talk about pausing, noticing, and deciding, or something. I think pause, notice, choose, I think is how we describe it, but just pausing, taking a breath and a second to notice what's showing up for me right now. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on around me? And how do I choose? What direction do I want to go? Do I want to be this person right now, or do I want to be this person? How do I want to go about this, living my life right now? And the last piece, just the self-compassion piece. But these are the three components we go over, just this idea of how do you notice when you're being critical and harsh with yourself and using a stick to beat yourself forward. And how do you turn towards yourself with kindness and soften around the struggle that you're experiencing, holding yourself gently, holding your experience gently, being a kind friend to yourself as opposed to a critic. And I'm acknowledging how difficult that can be, particularly when we're stressed out. Actually, we're even harsher with ourselves most of the time. And it is a practice. So remembering that this is not like a characteristic that you're born with, right? That we're talking about repertoires of behavior. So it is a skill that can be built, but it's not going to come overnight, and it has to be practiced in small ways until you get better at it and you start to be kind to yourself more automatically than you start to be harsh. And then just recognizing common humanity, we've already kind of brought that up, but that we're all in this together, right? We're all subject to the same principles. All humanity are having a hard time right now. And can we move towards people around us and towards the parents we care about instead of isolating ourselves or pushing people away? How do we acknowledge that? How do we acknowledge that we're all capable of amazing things and also really kind of crappy things, and making space for being vulnerable together? And the mindfulness piece is, again, just being able to show up and notice and acknowledge what's happening and what we're experiencing without judgment. And kindness, holding ourselves kindly and gently. And of course, we know that small changes grow into new patterns. So that's what we're all about as behavior analysts, starting small, shaping, and getting into bigger, better, more adaptive ways of being over time. And it takes practice. You can't just do self-care once and then be done. Awesome. It's more like a value, right? It's not a goal. It's a value. You have to keep moving towards north, always going north, always going north. You're gonna have to work on it over time. Same as healthy eating is another, it's not a good example of that. Like you can't eat healthy once and then be like, I'm done with healthy eating, I'm great. It's something that we have to keep turning back towards in order to maintain our health and well-being over time. And that's it. I think we have enough time for maybe a couple of questions or thoughts. We have like 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, this is great. There were a lot of things I think that you just said that resonated with a lot of people in terms of like every moment being a choice, you know, that I don't know, I think about even like, you know, within every or everyday interactions with other people, it's like, how do you remind yourself? It's like sometimes it feels so you forget, right? And I think that, I don't know, present moment awareness maybe, and just practicing that, I don't know, but it's like that you get so caught up in your feelings and emotions that you forget that you do have a choice, I guess.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, that if you're not paying attention, then you can't do anything differently, right? You have to be attending to what's going on around you and what you're doing. You have to notice what you're doing before you can do anything about it. So I would definitely say that practicing these mindfulness practices throughout your day, and by that, mindfulness doesn't have to be meditation. I mean, that doesn't work for me really, but just every and actually I started off by setting timers for myself, like every 30 minutes I would have a timer on my phone that would say, where are you right now, or what are you paying attention to right now? And it would be a cue for me to be like, oh, I'm thinking about dinner, or oh, I'm staring at my cat that, you know, licking its butt or whatever. It's like, what am I attending to in this moment? That just shaping that practice of just noticing where you're at, what stimuli are you attending to? And then you can start, when you're good at that, you can start practicing shifting your attention, right? So it's first, can I notice what I'm attending to? Then can I notice what I'm attending to and shift it to something else, and then shift it back, and practice strengthening that ability to shift your attention amongst the stimuli that are available in the environment. And then you can start thinking about, like, what is useful for me to attend to right now in this more challenging situation? And what do I want to attend to, and what do I want to respond to? So that's kind of the process. So I do think it starts with mindfulness. And self-compassion, I think, goes hand in hand with that. So being kind to yourself, because you are going to be stuck in your head and not attending to things that are useful and making mistakes. Like, can you hold yourself gently whilst doing this and allowing yourself, like, you are a beginner. It's a beginner skill. You're going to mess it up. You're not going to be good at it at first, especially in more challenging situations when you're upset, frustrated, angry, distressed. You have to start, that's another reason why it's good to start actually in everyday activities, because those are not hugely challenging situations to do this in.
I was just thinking, I was like, oh, great. Like at home, less work, if there was less work, but I was like, wow, that could actually be even more challenging to have to figure out how to do that right now. But I do like the idea of the timer, because I think that's the challenge, is like, how do you become more aware in the present moment when you're already not aware? It's like, there has to be some way, cue in your environment that brings you back. And it's, I think for me, it would be frequent. Like I would need to do it multiple times a day, right?
But give yourself permission to know that you're not going to, because it's not a habit, right? So you haven't built a habit. But another way, timers are good, but also just pairing with an activity. So if you always shower every morning, just saying to yourself, I'm going to try and remember to practice just at this one specific time. That can be a way to start too. So you just, that's how you kind of build habit.
I like that. Do you want to give everybody our last password before our time?
Yes, the last password will be habit. There we go.
I'll put that in the chat box too. Well, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I know we'll have the recording. Like I said, I will put that on our website. It takes a while to convert and upload and all that stuff. So hopefully by this evening it will be up there. But thank you so much. This was great.
You're welcome. I hope everybody's well today. It's Friday. Hopefully that means some peace